It's an introduction. I'm Rob, and I am the host of this podcast, The Arc Party. I typically don't do introductions. I just dive right into the meat of the conversation, but it has come to my attention. Some people might like a little bit of a setup before they get right to the good stuff. So I'm going to try it out and see how it goes. This episode, I'm talking to Nick Medina about his upcoming book, The Whistler. The Whistler, as you were about to hear, is a book about a character named Henry who is paralyzed. He's a ghost hunter who had an accident, and now he is dealing with his life post-accident and dealing with the consequences of some actions that he took. It centers around a native superstition about why you shouldn't whistle at night and some of the things that could happen if you do. But it also looks at what it's like to be a person who was very recently had their life drastically changed by an accident that changed their body. So it's a great conversation, and I think you're going to like it a lot. Nick is about to set up what the actual story is about with his words, and then we just jump right into the conversation, starting talking about a little bit about crossover of characters between the different books he's written. As always, I recommend that you pre-order The Whistler. You can also get Indian Burial Ground and Sisters of the Lost Nation, his two previous books as well. And if you want to support this podcast, please find me on social media. I am at The Arc Party pretty much everywhere. And I would absolutely love it if you could rate and review and subscribe to the podcast. Those are the things that you can do that actually help more people find the podcast and grow the audience. So any support that you can give would be incredibly greatly appreciated. And now here's Nick to explain what The Whistler is all about.
So the Whistler is about a young man named Henry who takes things a little too far in his pursuit to be an internet famous ghost hunter. And as a result, he ends up suffering an injury that leaves him with paralysis from the chest down. And he's no longer able to go out on his ghost hunts. It turns his life upside down. He starts to become haunted by his own regrets and also the devastating effects of the injury that he suffered. And he also starts to think that he might be haunted. And he starts to think that this haunting might be related to a murder mystery that occurred 50 years ago, and which is all linked to this superstition that comes from native folklore about not whistling at night. And so Henry ultimately finds out what will happen when you do whistle at night.
All right, so I wanted to start out, first of all, just acknowledge that this is the first book of yours that I've read, so I have not read Indian Burial Ground or Sisters of the Lost Nation. And I was coasting, I read the book, I was like, this is great. And then I get to your acknowledgments or afterward or whatever the acknowledgments at the end. And that's when I discovered that there are some like significant connections to Indian Burial Ground. And so
Yeah.
in my mind, I was like, well, that doesn't seem to have impacted my experience of reading this book at all because I had a great time reading it. However, now I'm curious, like for people who have read Indian Burial Ground, is there like a significant amount of difference, or is it one of those things where it's like, oh, I know that name, and like that's kind of it?
Yeah. So with my books, they're all related, but I work really hard to write them in a way where they kind of stand on their own. So each one has their own set of main characters. Each one has its own central mystery, but I also leave a question or two unanswered in each book. So that gives me something to play with in the next one. So you don't have to read all of them, and you certainly don't have to read them in any particular order. You'll get an independent story, an independent mystery. But if you want the fuller picture and you want to find out what's really happening in this universe, you could read all three of them and you'll see how things connect. So without spoiling what actually is connected between The Whistler and Indian Burial Ground, because I think my publisher has done a really nice job of keeping that secret. They don't even have it on, the book jacket or anything. There's nothing that mentions the connection to Indian Burial Ground, which I was really happy about. But yeah, I would say it's a pretty significant answer because I left something, like I said, I left something unanswered in Indian Burial Ground that a lot of people have asked me about after reading it. And so, The Whistler will give you that answer. But yeah, like I said, you don't have to read Indian Burial Ground. You're not going to be confused if you read The Whistler independently.
Now I'm wondering if my response is going to be too much of a spoiler, and I don't think it will be. But what that makes me think is knowing what that connection is, how long I had to read into the book to actually get the full picture of that,
Yeah,
was there was a lot of anticipation building that I think, had I had prior to this read Indian Burial Ground, possibly I would have felt that anticipation maybe a little bit greater because something was familiar.
I guess you're right about that. It's uh, I guess it's harder for me to have that experience because I know everything that's going on. But yeah, I think you're right. If people were invested in Indian Burial Ground, I think it'd be exciting to open up this book and be like, oh yeah, here's that answer that I didn't get before, and it might add to the experience. But like I said, I think either way, like even like you said, I think you can enjoy it either way.
The other thing that makes me think of is, first of all, I'm just a big fan of when there are crossovers between stories, whether it's like, because obviously, if you write a series, it's all one big story, but like if you
Yeah,
write separate individual things that have connective tissue, I just like that. I'm a fan of that. I like this ties to the thing I read before and my memories of reading through that. Um, but the other thing it does is now in my mind, the first thing I thought of when I realized there's a connection was, now I got to go read that one. Like, so maybe someone who's The Whistler is their first book they read of you, is there's a built-in incentive to go back and get the other stuff. So that's actually kind of I don't think that's what your goal was, but I think that's probably going to be an outcome of this.
yeah, and I don't go into it thinking that, but yeah, I mean, it'd be awesome if people read this one and want to pick up the other one. I know it's certainly something that my publisher would like, keep people interested in the books, and that's why we've kind of stuck to this type of storytelling with these. My first three books are all, like I said, they're all related, and that was something that my publisher was really interested in, and it's been a lot of fun building this world and getting to keep it growing with each book and seeing where things lead and what other cool kind of creepy stuff we can uncover around the next turn. And it's especially been fun to bring back characters and have them make small appearances here and there, or to pick up a smaller character from one of the books and then turn that character into one of the main characters in the newer books. Um, it's been a really fun ride for me to do that, and it's something that I never thought I would get to do. It's not something that I planned when I first wrote Sisters of the Lost Nation. Things just kind of kept growing from there, kept getting different ideas, and so far I haven't been able to slow down with it. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, you answered one of my questions by saying it's not what you originally intended, but it seems like it's something that suits you. So, um, looking forward, I have to imagine that that's definitely a opportunity that you're leaving open.
Yeah, definitely. I actually, right before I got on here with you, I was working on a manuscript that's plays off of The Whistler. So the universe is growing, and I don't know when that book will be out. Maybe in a couple of years, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to exploring more and more things on this reservation that I've created.
That's awesome. The A similar thing that comes to mind is Paul Tremblay, in his book, Survivor Song,
Yeah,
brought back a couple of very minor characters from Disappearance at Devil's Rock
right.
and kind of gave them an ending that he didn't give them in Disappearance. And when I saw that, having read that, I was like, yeah, this is great. And I was so excited that they were there, and I was so excited that their kind of minor story kind of became something different and got to be kind of wrapped up
Yeah.
in this one. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that too. And I love that kind of stuff in general. It's almost like a gift to fans who are, really into your work. Tremblay does that. Stephen King has done that a bunch of times with little characters. Uh,
Yeah.
it's always fun to see them return. And um, like you said, with Tremblay giving those characters an ending, I felt like I was able to do that with the Whistler. There were two characters in particular from my previous books who I felt like didn't get the peace that they deserved. They didn't get the closure that they deserved, and I was able to do that in this book, and it felt really good.
Well, the thing that I liked in your acknowledgments that you said, and correct me if I got this wrong, was kind of the idea that even when you were making the characters, they didn't necessarily start out as those characters from that.
Yeah.
But once you kind of realized that this fits, it was almost like it was always that way.
Yeah, sometimes it just plays out that way where you're just kind of writing and you're not thinking about exactly where things are leading. You're just kind of letting things unfold, and you start to make these connections and realize, oh yeah, this must mean that this goes here, and this person is related to that person. And it does sometimes feel like the world already exists. You're just tapping into it and figuring it out, like digging up an old gravesite or something, and you're finding all these pieces and figuring out how they relate to each other. And it's such a fun process for me. I've had a great time doing it, and I said I was working on this new book. New characters spring out of the old characters, if that makes sense. And I can't wait for people to meet them, really, because I think if you like my previous books, you're gonna like where the next one is headed as well.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, I really enjoy that.
Thanks.
I was gonna upfront say there's so many damn things to talk about. So I'm just gonna go into them at kind of random based on like where our conversation is and everything. But like there's so many different facets to kind of the makeup of this story. And I guess what I mean by that is there's the whole whistling at night thing. There's the kind of fable fairy tale thing that separates chapters sometimes with the boy with the two faces and um, that Phantom Whistler of Louisiana
Yeah.
thing. So there's all of these different things that kind of like connect together, and I'm like I could spend an hour talking about each one of those. Um, but I'm going to start out by saying that now, and I don't know if this is we're going to have to get into this, but at some point in the book you mentioned a Carolina Chickadee and it was in reference to this bird whistle that's happening.
Yeah.
And I have an app because I'm like an old person now. I have an app on my phone where I can like identify the sound of a bird, but then it'll also play bird sounds for you if you think it's this bird. And so
Yeah.
I went and I listened to that and I was like, fuck, those are around me all the time. And now I'm gonna be nervous all the time. So um
Yeah. I always, I would hear that call as well, and I did have to research it as well to figure out what kind of bird that was making that sound. When I started working on this, and I had to decide what this whistle was going to sound like, that was the first thing that really came to mind because I think there is something chilling about that call, at least to me anyway. And yeah, I had to find it, and then uh, like you're saying, there's so many different pieces, and you need those pieces to connect, and they have to fall in place the right way. And I was researching, like, does this type of chickadee live in Louisiana? And there's only one type of chickadee that actually lives in Louisiana where the story takes place. So that limited my options as to which one I could use. But in the end, I think it all worked out pretty well. And I'm glad you actually looked it up because that was something that I was kind of worried about because I do want people to have a reference to it. So hopefully people will look it up as well. And so they'll be hearing that in their heads each time the Whistler strikes.
that's and I was like, I don't know if this is the best idea or the worst idea to do that because yeah, they're common in Illinois, which is where
Yeah,
you and I both live. So
right.
now I hear that bird and I'm like, oh, it's connecting me to this thing. But
Because as long as you don't hear it at night, I guess it's all right.
well, and that's all right. So that's leads me into the next thing I want to talk about, which is there's a lot of there's at least some like superstitious kind of elements to these to that part of it or like there's beliefs around the why like and I'm trying to find the I really don't believe in a lot. I'm not religious. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't uh I'm a very kind of literal world kind of person, but
Yeah,
when you introduce something like that, in my mind, I'm like, because I'm like, well, I'm not gonna fuck with that because why? And so I
why
was
take
talking,
the
I was talking to my girlfriend about this book because it's so fascinating, and then talking about how I was going to interview you, and she's like, "Well, you guys need to whistle while you're on that podcast," and I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea. So,
yeah, after a certain hour, I don't think it's wise to be whistling.
but that leads me. So the question I want to ask about that is, how connected are you to some of the stuff that you write about? Is this more, um, this is a fiction story, or is this stuff that's like ingrained in you in a way?
No, I think I'm fairly similar to you, where I need a lot of evidence to believe in something. As much as I want to believe in supernatural elements, and I was actually talking about this yesterday with ghosts. I want to believe, I want to see it, I want to have the evidence of it. I actually have. I'm in my office right now, and over my desk I have the X-Files poster. It says, "I want to believe."
Nice.
Uh, but yeah, no, it's hard for me to just to kind of submerge myself in some of those superstitions and stuff. It's not easy for me to do that because there's always something to explain it away. There's always science or something that's going to give me the answer that I need. So it's not something that I kind of live my life by. But I am fascinated by those types of things. I love superstitions. I love lore and folklore in general, and learning about different beliefs that come from different cultures. That's always been something that I've been interested in. Even before I was a full-time writer, I used to teach, and one of the classes I used to teach was intercultural communication, where we would talk about
Mm.
all different types of cultural elements. So that's just something I've always had a fascination for, and obviously it's gonna play a big part in my writing, and it
Oh,
does.
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, and that makes me think of when after I finished reading the book, I was just kind of trying to just casually, not intensely, but casually research the whole idea behind like the caution around whistling at night. And general like internet searches lead you to like there's so many cultures that have
Yeah,
some sort of belief or superstition or whatever around the like don't do that. And so then I was like, okay, this is something that is a pervasive idea that it's not necessarily just kind of one group of people who arrived at that. It's something it's pretty widespread.
yeah, it's actually pretty worldwide. There's a number of Asian cultures, European cultures, obviously Native American cultures here in the United States and in Canada. So it is really fascinating how all of these different groups spread out across the world have this same belief, and um, it is pretty much exactly the same when you look at it. Um, there are, some slight derivations, especially with the type of creature or the type of entity you might draw to yourself by whistling at night. But the basic principles of it are all the same.
Hmm.
And I've researched it as well, and there is no real answer of where it started. Where it started and why. It's hard to really identify. So it is something that I think not only appeals to a lot of people, but obviously already frightens a lot of people. So using it in a book is a great kind of jumping off point for a horror story because you already have the history built in.
That reminds me, I was talking to Philip Fracassi about when he had Boys in the Valley come out. I talked to him about that book, and he was talking about one of his major approaches is like writing things that people connect to. And
Yeah,
so if one of the things that's, significant in your story is something that people are already afraid of, you already got them. And
right.
the people who aren't afraid, it's probably not that hard to get them to catch up either. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because you already know that it's something that works well in terms of scaring people. So why not play off it and see where you could take it and what you could do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That also then leads me to the idea of that something that it doesn't matter if you believe in it. Like if you do the thing, you're going to have the consequence. And I'm really a big fan of like story elements that are like a transgression punishment. Like if you do the thing you're not supposed to do, here's something bad will happen. And that's the feeling I got from this whole like kind of whistling element to it was um it doesn't matter what you think of it. If you do the wrong thing, something is gonna come of it.
Right. And that's another thing that's really relatable, right? That's a common premise that people are going to recognize. They know uh, that when you hear this superstition, it's setting you up to later see what's going to happen to someone who's going to break this rule or break this command, basically. And we see that in so many horror stories, and there's so many different ways that it could play out, which I think is what makes it really fun to use those types of setups. But yeah, obviously, this book opens, or the opening scene includes the superstition saying, you never whistle at night. And as soon as you hear that, or as soon as you read that, you know that something's coming. And it just primes you and makes you kind of sit at the edge of your seat a little bit, or at least for me, like when I'm watching a horror movie or something and you get that setup, you know what's coming, and you know it's not going to be good.
And I will say, so that prologue does make a big promise, but it also sets the tone for like, um, if we see something like this again, now we kind of know what could happen. And so
Yeah.
you create this tension between if that happens again and when the bad thing. So like you did a great job of building in if A, B, but like in
Yeah.
between A and B, we're just freaking out the whole time because we know what could happen.
Yeah, we're waiting for it, and and I think that was, for me anyway, that was the fun part of really developing this. I kind of wanted. I was thinking about a lot about horror movies, and I first, for that prologue scene that you were talking about, I was thinking about movies like Scream, where they open up with this great opening scene that really sets the tone. Like you said, it tells you exactly what can happen and what basically will happen throughout this movie, or throughout the story. And I was also thinking about things like Jaws, where you're kind of just waiting for it to happen. You
Yes,
know it's
yes.
around, you know it's lurking, you know it's out there. You just don't know exactly when it's going to strike. And I think that's the 2 points you were talking about, that A and that B. We got a glimpse of it, and now we're just waiting for when it's going to come back. And bringing it back was a lot of fun, I'll say.
Yeah, and like what and you just so I love both of those examples. And the other example I think of from books is the beginning of My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham
Uh,
Jones, that
yeah,
the prologue in there with the kids on the lake, because it's
yeah,
so classic and like, but also just so chilling because they're um because you don't know in that situation you don't know why they're being punished until
right.
really honestly like the end of the series, um but what happens to them is so fucked up, and then the rest of the book you're like, wait, when's this going to come back? But the Jaws thing, yeah, because it's an unknown element that's completely out of your control. And
Yeah.
so the only thing that you can do is just hope somehow you survive, or if you can figure out some way to um you can figure
Or
out a way to survive it. Yeah.
Yeah, or it's just like the same thing with like whistling at night. Yeah, stay out of the water. It could be as simple as that. Don't go in the water, and you'll be safe. But all these people still want to get in the water, get on the boat, and there's always that temptation. Everyone always wants to mess with what they know can hurt them, and it's not always clear why, but that's what makes it fun. I think
Mhm.
we dive
I
into it, see what these motivations are.
right. And I'm guilty of being that same way sometimes. Like when the first thing I thought of when I do you know what the elevator game is?
No, I'm not
It's
familiar with that.
it's it's like
I
this.
don't
What's
I don't
that?
think so. It sounds vaguely familiar, but no, I don't think I know the.
It's like this Korean. I'm gonna try and do the real brief explanation of it, but it's like this Korean um, urban legend superstition kind of thing where you need to go into a building that's got at least 10 floors, and then you go to an elevator and you go to different floors in a certain order. And if you do it the right way, this you go to another dimension or something like that, like ridiculous. But it's supposed to be really scary, and like the way that it's presented is like this is a really scary thing. And my first thought was like, well, I'll do that because I don't believe in it. But then
Yeah,
I'm the person that would be later on the story would be made of because I did the thing that obviously you shouldn't have done.
you're going to be the opening scene. You're the first one to go, and
Yes.
everyone's going to be talking about it. You're the one who's going to become part of the lore later on.
Right.
Well, Robb did this, and now now he's gone.
Now,
Yeah,
yeah, he's the cautionary tale.
exactly.
So, but yeah, I love that. I love the other example I can think of like it doesn't matter if you believe it or not is It Follows,
Yeah.
where
Funny enough, when you were saying that, that was the first movie that came to mind.
yeah, yeah, that first of all just great, but also like you spend the rest of your time, and that's that suspense and that tension that we were talking about. You spend the rest of your time just trying to outrun the consequence, kind of
Yeah.
in a way. Yeah.
And constantly searching for it. Like, when is it going to appear? And that's that Jaws element, I think,
Yeah.
again, where it's coming for you. It's around, and you can't escape it this time. And yeah, then you spend the rest of the time trying to save yourself, essentially.
But then I think also in this book, um, specifically, one thing that you did was, in a way, the people have to realize that that's what is happening a little bit.
I think in most stories you have to have in order to get to that conclusion and kind of wrap things up and get the answers that the characters need. You do have to have some sort of revelatory moment, and we haven't talked a lot about. You brought up a tale that's woven throughout the book called "The Boy with Two Faces," and so that's part of the lore that is incorporated into this story. So, like you said earlier, there's several different components. You have the whistling component, but we also have this lore component, and it refers to Native American folklore that revolves around these characters called two-face characters. And the two-face character has a normal face in the front, and it has a hideous face on the back of its head. And there are different versions of the tale depending on where it's coming from, since there's so many different tribal nations. But the basics of the story are that if you see the hideous face on the back of the head, you'll either drop dead immediately or you might be paralyzed. And then the two-faced creature will come back and kill you, maybe eat you. There's a lot of cannibalism in native folklore, which is something I personally love and which is featured in most of my books. But yeah, sorry, I got a little off track there, but we have this two-face element, and that's something that Henry is the main character. I don't think we named him already, but Henry's the main character in The Whistler, and Henry starts to think or feel like he's being haunted, and he's starting to see this shadowy figure. And like I said, I don't want to give away too much, but there is a revelatory moment where Henry realizes that things are connected to um, obviously connected to the superstition of not whistling, but also to this other character, the Two-Face character. Um, and I think I'll leave it at that because I don't want to say like how it's discovered or how things start to come together. But that, I think, is the revelatory moment where the characters start to realize what exactly went wrong, and then we get the real answer as to what happened
Right.
shortly after that.
Right. Yeah. Then it all kind of is laid bare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
I'm very worried about spoiling things, but
yeah,
there's
I think it can be a complicated story to break down because there's that one big portion that I don't want to give too much away about,
yeah.
just because even if I just say a name, I think it's going to give away too much.
Yeah.
Uh, so
The scene and the stuff that we can't reveal that you were just talking about, I want to say was a very powerful moment and was very well done. And that's all I want to say because like it's such a good moment that like people who read it should experience it unspoiled. but there's another element. So we've done a great job of not acknowledging characters or their situations, but
Yeah.
I'll break it down really quick, but then I'm going to go into another kind of topic I want to cover. Henry is the protagonist, and he is paralyzed
Mhm.
because of an accident that happened, like, a year or so before the story picks up. And then
Yeah.
he's got a girlfriend named Jade and a best friend nicknamed Toad, and the three of them are ghost hunters.
Right.
And Henry's kind of ambition is to kind of make it big as like a ghost hunter YouTuber kind of thing. Um, but the accident that caused him to be paralyzed really kind of shattered that ambition. And one thing that I will say just from reading the book, but also then reading your acknowledgments in the back of the book, is how great of a job you did of honoring disabled people and realistically depicting um, their situation, their challenges, but also like the mental anguish of having a life altering thing happen to you and then trying to,
Mhm.
exist afterward. I want to say that not only did you do a great job of depicting it in the book, but then just a very beautiful job of recognizing and acknowledging people who actually are disabled in your acknowledgments.
Thanks. Yeah, that was, that was probably the thing I was most concerned about when writing this book. First, could I even write a character like Henry? Do I have the right to write about someone who lives with paralysis, something that I have never experienced? And I wouldn't have attempted it, and I wrote this in my afterword that you mentioned, but I wouldn't have attempted writing a character like this if I didn't have a lot of help from a lot of people. And first off, I want to acknowledge just there's a really large community of people with paralysis online who post every aspect of their lives. They make these videos and share everything that they go through, all of the the lows, the low lows, the highs of being able to do something that they thought they might not ever be able to do again, or just stuff that might seem like small achievements to us, like being able to pick up a pencil or a fork or something like that. They share these moments from their lives, and I watched um, dozens of these channels with these people who are so generous and share all of these things, because so much of it is so personal and so painful. Um, but I learned a lot from them, and in addition to that, I also know someone who um, became paralyzed after falling asleep while driving a trip when he was in college, and he's lived with quadriplegia ever since, and it's been over 12 years now, I think. And he was extremely helpful, a great resource on this book. And he answered every single question I had. He sat down with me numerous times to answer these questions, and he didn't shy away from anything. Because there are some things in this book that are uh, or would be considered really personal, things. There's scenes with, how does a person with paralysis engage in intimacy with their partner? How do they um, use the washroom and stuff like that? So, of course, I wanted to be respectful, but I also wanted to make sure that everything was as accurate as it could be. And like I said, if I didn't have people helping me with that, there's no way I would have even attempted this. And like you said, I think it is a fair representation, and I don't think I could ever have come close to getting that type of representation if I didn't have those resources who were so helpful and willing to answer every single question that I had.
Uh, my in my personal life, maybe my personal experience with this topic, when I was in the like third grade, I had a friend who I met in the third grade who he's like one of my closest friends today. Over the course of like between third grade and like I want to say eighth grade, um, it was slowly discovered that he had like a neuromuscular disorder. So he was running, playing tag, like without any kind of issues when he was in the third grade, but as the
Yeah.
years went on, he would fall down more and like just it seemed like he was clumsy, but really like his body was failing him, and eventually over the course of about 5 years, he ended up in a wheelchair kind of permanently, and he has some mobility. He can walk with like little crutch stick things, but like for the most
Yeah.
part, he's in a chair. And I think that one of the best things that's happened in my life is being with him as he went through that,
Oh, no
because I
kidding.
got to see a person um, have his whole life change, but see him be the same person the whole time. And that was really important to me, was like, in retrospect, it's important to me knowing that like um, he never changed. His situation changed.
No, that does sound pretty incredible because when you hear so many of these stories, there is a lot of, well, obviously, there's so much loss that it's hard not for a person to change. And um, part of that, and maybe this is what your friend was able to do better than some others, perhaps, is being able to grieve that loss and to find ways to deal with that loss, and not letting it ruin what you still have,
Hmm.
what you are still able to do. And that's not an easy thing.
Yeah, and I think that he definitely benefited from having just a ton of people who loved him and would do anything for him, and like never made him feel like anything different. But he also is very much like the things in life that are challenges are opportunities to like be an example or whatever. He's very positive, and so like there's that side of it. But and the other thing I'm thinking is like maybe there's a lot of grief that I didn't get to see, that he didn't show people,
Yeah.
but he was also a child, so I wonder if that's different. Like the world was being defined for him as his body was changing. So
Right.
but I actually I was at a little street festival thing in my town recently, and I ran into a guy who I went to high school with, and I had not seen him since being in high school. And sometime between when I had last interacted with him and when I just ran into him a couple weeks ago, he had been, and it was like a long time ago, it was like 25 years ago, he was in a car accident, and now he's in a wheelchair. And the thing that I was like, that stood out to me about him was, and I think this is connected to what you're saying about the people on YouTube who are so open with sharing their lives, is this guy was like he was a total stranger. He came up to me and he said something and I was like, "Hey, blah blah blah." And he just kind of explained I was in a car accident and this is what happened to me. I didn't even ask. He just volunteered it. And he was so forthcoming. He was so forthcoming with me about that I just felt like, man, I just want to talk to this guy. I want this guy to be around me because he was so open and so
Yeah.
he shared so much. And then I was like, wait a minute. And then we realized that we had known each other so long ago, and I was just very grateful that like I ran into him, and he he was just, yeah, like he was so open to sharing his experience, that it was comforting and welcoming, and like I've thought about like the things in my life that are hard for me to talk about, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this guy's putting out the biggest trauma of his life to a person he just met, and I'm afraid to talk about you know
Yeah.
something that's not nearly as significant. And it was kind of inspirational too, like that he was able to be that way.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I've thought about that a lot, because a lot of the people that I was able to learn from via their posts online and social media, these are a lot of young people. And on one hand, it made it really tough because you see these young people with their whole lives ahead of them, and those lives have just been altered in a split second. It could be just one decision. They dove into the water the wrong way or something. They
Yeah.
dove into the water without knowing what was under the surface, and just like that, their whole life is changed, and they have to adjust. And yet, for a lot of us, I think that would feel like the end. Basically, you lose so much with an incident like that, and yet they find ways to not only go on, but ways to inspire others. And they share those experiences to show everyone else that, hey, if I can deal with this, you can deal with whatever you're going through as well. And it is, in a way, it is a very caring act. It's a very generous act, I think. And like I said
Yeah.
before, I'm extremely appreciative to all those people who helped me with this.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 100% with what you said. And now I'm thinking about Henry in the book and all of the stuff that he's going through, because you did depict a lot of the grief and the bitterness and the anger that someone would
Yeah.
naturally go through. And I mean, I connected to that. I had cancer a few years ago, and so like I had to go through that like my whole life. I could die. Like like there's things that you go through that you think about.
Yeah.
Um, and what I connected with Henry in this book, and you can correct me if I'm off track, was sometimes when we have that grief, like we just want to hide from it. We don't want to confront it. We don't want to really come to terms with what's going on. And I feel like there was a bit of that with Henry
Yeah.
about the events of his life, and that I feel like was kind of, if that was like a literal thing that was looming in his life, it was kind of a metaphor for like, or the other stuff, the whistle at night stuff and all that was kind of a metaphor for like the monster of his grief and stuff that he didn't want to face.
Yeah. Well, denial and anger are parts of the process of ultimately leading to acceptance. And yeah, Henry has a lot of anger in him over what's happened and even things that he's done. And there's regret, and along with that, there's denial. And he has a hard time accepting everything that has happened. A hard time even accepting that he might be responsible for some of what actually happened. And yeah, it's that superstition, the whistle that comes back, and that's what ultimately starts the haunting, and that's what ultimately leads to Henry having the realizations that he has, and it leads us kind of to uh, that part of the book where everything just comes together
um,
without saying too much.
yeah, I know. We're really dancing around the good stuff. The other thing, so what that does though is that that's another really relatable thing, like not wanting to admit what's wrong with us or not wanting to take responsibility for things we did is I mean that's all of us. We've all been there. It's something that we can all connect to. So um as much as that dude was struggling and then had his bad moments and stuff, we've all been Henry.
Yeah, and I think especially for younger adults, you're just um, not only discovering who you are, but what you want to do in this world, and to suddenly have so much of that taken away and altered. Of course, he's going to have a great deal of anger, and he's not going to know how to really function. And so that was obviously something that had to be addressed in the book, and it adds to Henry's character. A lot of people who have read the book in advance are telling me that they don't like Henry, especially at first. And I agree. He is kind of he's a character who wants a lot of attention. He's not the most considerate person all the time. He'll talk over you, turn things around, and make it about himself. But seeing what he's gone through, and then taking into account all of the things that he has to deal with, I think you ultimately come to an understanding of why he's the way he is. And I think there's a really nice change to Henry as well throughout the story, and that was something that my editor really helped me with, and we worked really hard on to give Henry some redeeming moments towards the end.
Mhm. Without saying anything, there was a moment um, with Henry and Jade and Toad at the kind of very end that was just beautiful.
Oh,
Just so, like, I could not have thought of a better way to like tie it all together. It's thematic to, what they did in their lives before, but it's like evolved into something that's more meaningful and like, yeah, like I'm going to be as vague as possible, but I got to sing the praises, man. The way that you
okay.
kind of move them forward after kind of like that, you know,
Well,
I can't think of the word, but like
I think we could
climax
call
of the
it.
story, like there was the climax and then like what happened after, the what you did with them, I thought was so nice. It was nice.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I wanted them to have, after all they've been through, I wanted them to have a sense of peace and sense that, okay, we can carry on after this. We'll find our way. And also in that scene, I was, referring back to something I said earlier. Also in that scene, I was able to give some peace to some of my other characters as well, which um, I was really happy about. I loved how that really came together. I know you haven't read all my books yet, but if you read Sisters of the Lost Nation and Indian Burial Ground, you'll see how all those pieces just kind of came together, and it's just something that really made me happy to be able to come back and do this, especially since I wasn't planning on writing The Whistler. It was, I was working on another manuscript actually, and my editor, and I put this in my afterword in the book, but my editor had asked me that question, what happened in Indian Burial Ground? And eventually an answer just kind of came out of nowhere, and it just kept growing and growing. And um, yeah, it led to, I think, a really nice sense of closure for a lot of characters in my books.
Yeah, yeah. Peace is a really good word. That scene or that moment in the book was just peace in a big way. And even the way that Henry took in the scene versus like what the other friends kind of connection to it was, I thought was good too.
Yeah,
Like it all, yeah, it all just really nicely kind of like connected. Yeah.
thanks.
Um, uh, Rhett was a character that I thought was cool. And in the book, and Rhett is someone who's also, I'm guessing paralyzed. And he's kind of a person who's like taken it upon himself to be a resource for other people who are experiencing
Yeah,
similar things. And so, um, I think that, that what I really, he's one of those little characters where didn't show up much, didn't have a lot of words kind of connected to him, but um, that guy introduced so many like kind of lifelines for someone in that situation where it's like, you know what? I know it feels like everything is done, but I'm here to tell you, like, there is like a tomorrow. And so,
yeah.
um, I feel like the book might have felt like something was missing without a character like that.
Yeah, and there was actually a discussion, whether there should be a character like Rhett or not. I had originally planned when I outlined the book to have him in there, and then when I was talking to my friend who does live with paralysis, um, he said, "No, I don't think you should have that character." He was actually pretty strongly against it because he had lived through that and he had experienced characters like that, and he didn't just want things to just kind of be glossed over and be like, oh, everything can be okay, life goes on, whatever. But then once he read the book obviously early, and he was able to go over everything with me, and then once he read it, he did change his mind, and he thought it was handled well. And I felt strongly about the Rhett character because you couldn't have the things that Rhett tells Henry come from someone else. Yes, other people could say those words, but it's not going to have the same impact, obviously, and it's not going to
Yeah.
be treated with the same type of credibility. So, um, Rhett was someone who was desperately needed, in my opinion, and Rhett is also in a position that some would say is, and even Henry thinks is worse than Henry's own position. Rhett has paralysis basically from the neck down. He doesn't have use of his arms like Henry does, and that makes a huge difference. between what you can do and how you can live, and even like what kind of wheelchair you can use. So for Henry to see that someone he perceives as being worse off than him is actually doing better than he is, that's a big eye-opening moment eventually for Henry. He's resistant at first, and that's part
Yeah.
of his denial and his anger. But then ultimately, he sees that there is a lot of value in Rhett and with what Rhett shares with him.
Yeah, and um, for me, it kind of accomplished two things, and I can see why your friend could hesitate if the character was like a not a Deus ex machina, but something that was just like, um, you know, because I'm here, you're
Yeah.
going to mentally get to the point where I'm at. Like if it was that, like
Mm-hmm.
I could see where that would be problematic because it's like that's not real. But what I liked about Rhett was, yeah, it was a slap of perspective. Like, first of all, you don't own this. There's a lot of us out here who are going through the same thing,
Yeah.
and to varying degrees. So, like, first of all, like, you have to, because, like, when I was going through cancer, I was the only person in my life that was currently going through cancer. So, until I interacted with other kind of either cancer survivors or whatever, it was like cancer's my thing. And, like, and when I started kind of talking to other people, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not the only person who suffers this. This is like a common experience. And that was like perspective I needed to not um, kind of be up my own ass about it in a way. So I think that was very important. But it's also a push. It's a push to like make you think about a thing. So if that, and that's why I said if Rhett wasn't in the book, it would have, I think it would have ended up being that thing where it's like maybe some perspective happened that was not earned. So like that's why I think yeah, he was an
Yeah.
important character.
Yeah. Um, Going back to what you were saying about your experience with cancer, and just feeling, I think that's natural, where obviously our world revolves around us,
Yeah.
but it's not until we step out step out of ourselves a little bit that we realize that, hey, not only are other people going through it, but we're not as isolated or not as alone as we think. And it's once you have that sense of community that maybe it makes things a little bit easier to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I totally agree. And so that's yeah, like I'm not going to say that any one character is more memorable than another in this book, but I think that like the ROI on the amount of time Rhett spends versus what Rhett brings to the book is it's a very it's a special character.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to hear that. You're the first one who's actually brought up Rhett to me, so
Oh.
I'm glad he had an impact.
Well, I think, like we see, you know, um we see maybe sometimes what we need or what we didn't have,
Yeah,
and that's why it becomes significant to us. So like in a situation, either we see the thing we didn't have that we needed, or we see the thing that we had that was very helpful, and so maybe that's why Rhett kind of stands
no,
out to me. Yeah.
for sure.
All right, so we talked a lot about I feel like I gravitate toward the more serious parts of the book and the themes and everything, and I get all weepy a lot. But the main character and his closest people are ghost hunters. So what was it about ghost hunting that you wanted to that drew what drew you to ghost hunting that you wanted to include it in the book?
You know, I'm not even sure. Sometimes, a lot of times when I'm writing, things just kind of come out of nowhere, and I actually have been telling myself to try to take note of where the ideas come from and pay more attention to them. Because sometimes I'll just be listening to a song and then something will just pop into my head, and I'll just run with it. I can't remember exactly what what led to me wanting Henry to be a ghost hunter. If I stop and think about it, I might be able to piece it together. Well, it's related to one character who I don't want to name, but it's a character who is kind of a scaredy cat. So I think that played into it, where we needed to have that character interacting with Henry in a way that makes him uncomfortable in order to lead to the things that happen in the book. And I hate to talk so cryptically, but I don't want to give any of that away, obviously. But yeah, I don't know for sure. I can't remember exactly why I wanted the ghost hunter element. But I knew, I was dealing with the superstition. I was dealing with entities and spirits. Now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, I think it was just kind of I needed something for Henry to do that would allow him to gain the attention that he wanted. Just to give a little more backstory, Henry started off as a wannabe rock star. He's playing a guitar in a band, and he's able to perform in his grandparents' bar on the reservation where they live. But then the pandemic strikes. Uh, Live performances are obviously out of the question, so he's not able to perform in front of audiences anymore. He's not getting the attention he craves. So he figures, I can start ghost hunting. I don't need to be in public for that. I can film the videos, post them online, and I can get that internet fame, and that's what he craves. So I think it was just kind of like you said, just a logical thematic thing that went along with the story.
Nice, nice. We all want to be YouTube famous, I think, at this
Yeah,
point.
get
All
the
right.
follow.
Yeah. um, one thing that occurs to me, first of all, you did a good job acknowledging what some of the inspirations were for like um the prologue. You in your acknowledgments, you kind of mentioned where that come from
Yeah.
and stuff. So like you did acknowledge some of the information like that you kind of used collectively, but this is kind of a two-parter. Was there any specific like stuff that you used as research to make sure you got the facts right? Or is there any resources you'd recommend for someone who really wants to kind of dig into like the not whistling at night or um, any of the other elements that are in the book?
Yeah. So for um, native folklore, there are a few sources that I use. One of them is this book called American Indian Myths and Legends. I basically think of it as kind of like the Bible of native folklore. It's this huge edition, and it's got um, hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 or more. I don't know. These native tales in there that were all compiled and organized by Richard Erdos, and that was put together in the 1980s. And I've been, using that for pretty much everything I've ever written that relates to native storytelling. I find that really valuable because there's so much in there that not only obviously gives you an idea of what was important to certain tribes at certain times, but it also, for me, just gets my imagination going. As soon as I read about these characters, like I said earlier, a lot of them involve cannibalism, and there's so many different warnings and so many different horrific creatures in native folklore that I just want to write about all of them, to be honest. So that's one of the sources that I use. Um, when it comes to the superstition about whistling at night, I just did internet searches with that. Like I said before, I wasn't ever able to find like a specific
Yeah.
answer telling me where this all started. But there are a lot of different accounts and you know articles that you can read about different cultures that believe in this superstition or uphold the superstition. And then for some of it was just kind of from my own imagination. I always kind of put a twist on folklore myself. So, like the tale that we referenced earlier in the book called the Boy with Two Faces, that's based on native folklore, but it's all unique to my fictional tribe. So I made it apply to them. Um, I'm trying to think of other sources that I used. There were some older newspaper articles that I found online as well that relate to the story about the Phantom Whistler of Louisiana, and
Hmm.
that was one that I just kind of came across when um, I was actually doing a search trying to find a piece that I needed for the puzzle. I had the superstition about whistling. I had other ideas about what I wanted to use within the book, but I didn't have the central piece that I needed to connect the beginning to the end, basically. And when I came across that story about this phantom whistler, uh, which took place in the 1950s, and the story basically is that a young woman started hearing whistling outside her window, and the whistling continued, and eventually she started receiving phone calls, threatening phone calls, and no one ever found out who this phantom whistler was, what he was doing, what he really wanted, but he did threaten to kill her. She ultimately didn't suffer any physical harm at all. But when I read that story, that was kind of the moment when everything fell into place for me. You know, it just seemed to make sense. My stories take place in Louisiana. That happened in Louisiana. Obviously, it was about whistling. I wanted to tie it to the superstition, and then I was able to bring in the Two-Face folklore as well and link it all together.
That's awesome. Yeah, I when I after I read your acknowledgments afterward thing, and you had mentioned the Phantom Whistler of Louisiana, I was like, oh, I'm gonna look into this
Yeah,
because that sounds creepy. And I actually found I mean, there's a billion true crime podcasts. So there's like
yeah,
my girlfriend found a couple of episodes of different podcasts that talk about it, and I walked away from it thinking, oh man, Nick really upped the ante on this one. Like,
yeah. I mean, it did get the imagination going. I haven't listened to any of the podcasts, but I do have those newspaper clippings saved to saved on my computer,
yeah.
and that's what I used. And I don't know. Sometimes I think those true crime podcasts embellish a little bit, which obviously is what I did as well when I turned it into my turned it into my prologue, basically. But yeah, it was too perfect not to use.
Yeah.
I had to incorporate it.
Well, you embellished to better effect than at least the two podcasts that I listen to. So,
Yeah,
um, I'll, yeah. The tricky thing about podcasts is anybody can do them is kind of the impression I walked away with. Like I got the basic information from them that I got from reading, the stuff from
right.
what you just said, and the rest of it was just like, oh man, this is kind of like, I don't know. It was a little cheesy, but I
Well, yeah,
I liked your take on it a lot better.
well, I appreciate that, but yeah, so many of those like TikTok things and those podcast things are just 18-year-olds reading what they read online, turning it into something that's you know more uh, more scandalous or more. I'm blanking out on the word I want to use.
Sensational or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
since that's exactly more
Yeah.
sensational than what it really was in the first place.
Did you see that this is a total tangent, the Ghostbusters Afterlife? It's the Ghostbusters movie that's like kind of in the present day.
I think I did. I saw one of those sequels. Was that the first one, or I
It's
can't even remember.
it's the first one where they like it's
Okay.
the granddaughter
Yeah.
on the farm and everything.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I saw that one.
She befriends that kid who calls himself Podcast.
I don't even.
Um
I don't even remember it that well.
anyway, this kid, like, for anybody who's listening who knows what I'm talking about, the episodes of different podcasts I listened to were essentially that, where it was like, but what did it mean? Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sensational shellac. But anyway, and I won't name them because I don't want to shame anybody because they're doing something they like to do. But great. Well, no, I especially with something like this where there are kind of like tendrils into real life. My first thought is like, where can I learn more about this? So I'm thankful that you gave me and anybody else kind of some suggestions about where we could go to learn more about that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
When I thank people for coming on, the first thing I always want to do is thank you for spending the time creating something so entertaining because I know it's not easy and I know it is just so much labor. So like when I get through a book and I really enjoy it, I'm so thankful that you decided that you had an idea and you decided to pursue it and then you followed it through and like it actually ended up being published because that was a great experience reading that book. So thank you for taking the time to make The Whistler and I guess your other books that informed it too.
Oh, yeah. There's no better feeling or greater compliment from anyone than to simply hear that they've read your book, and they, just like you said, spending time. And I think if I remember correctly, I think I put that in my afterword this time. Thanking
Yep.
readers for every second that they choose to spend with with my book. There's a million books you could choose to pick up mine and to give up part of your life essentially, to read something that I wrote. I don't take that lightly. So thank you in return. And it's an honor to do it. I feel privileged really to be able to do this. Not everyone gets to live their dream, and I've been lucky enough to do it. So thank you.
That's awesome. So, wrapping things up, we're recording on August 26th. Your book comes out the 16th of September.
Yep.
And you've got, at least I know, several Chicago area events coming up. Are
Yep.
you, is it wider than just the Chicagoland area, or like what does your kind of promotional situation look like?
Yeah, so far in terms of live appearances or in-person appearances, I should say, most of them are going to be in the Chicago area right now. I will be at New York Comic Con the weekend of October, I think it's 9th or 10th, something in that area. But aside from that one, so far, everything I have scheduled is in the Illinois, Chicago area. But maybe next year, a lot of the book festivals take place in spring, and I was
Yeah.
able to go to some of those last year. So maybe I'll do some more traveling, early next year. But right now, I'm just taking them as they come, and whatever pops up is what I'm gonna do, I guess.
Well, I'm looking forward to bumping into you at a Barnes and Noble very close to my house, and then
For
also
sure.
at a brewery very close to my house in the near future. So if anybody's in the
Oh,
Chicagoland area, I know that you posted your schedule and stuff on social media, so at least on Instagram, but probably other places too. They can check you out and
yeah.
see where you're going to be.
I think the easiest thing to do if you want to find out anything about me, go to my website. It's just my name, www.nickmedina.net. I got all my links there and everything. So if you want to check my stuff out, um, yeah, it's all there for you.
Well, Nick, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you and sharing my thoughts about this book. And I'm so just ready to dive into those previous books and looking forward to whatever this new manuscript is that I get to read in the future too. So thank you for
I'll make
joining
sure to
me.
get the to you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Uh,
thanks so
but
much.
yeah, we got a book coming out next November that I'm super excited about. I think anyone who really loves horror is going to dig it because I got to play with a lot of horror tropes. So yeah, I'll make sure you get that one as well. But thank you so much. I appreciate all the kind things you said about the Whistler and just spreading the word about it. Like you said, as a writer, you put so much time and effort into it. You just want people to hopefully pick it up. So thank you so much. I truly appreciate it.
So excited that I got to have Nick on to talk about this book. I loved this book. I thought it was quick and compelling and so interesting, and he did such a great job of honoring all the different elements that he put into the book. So if you've read Nick before and loved him, I think that you are going to continue to love the stuff that he's doing. And if you're new to Nick's work, this is my first book I've read by him, and I loved it. And now I want to go back. I want to check out the other stuff. So please pre-order or buy it when it comes out. Give him a nice launch. And again, any support you can give this podcast is greatly appreciated. So subscribe however you get your podcasts. Leaving ratings and reviews do actually work the algorithm, so it does bring more attention to this podcast to new listeners and grows the audience, and that's greatly appreciated. Subscribe to my Substack, which is at thearcparty.com. So that every time there's a new episode, you get it right away. And if you're looking for books, I do have an affiliate page with bookshop.org. So that's linked in my link tree. If you go on my social media, you'll see my link tree that shows you where to get me on all the places. When you buy books from my affiliate page, I do get a little bit of money from that. That's the only way that actually any money comes to me. But that's another way to support the podcast. So please subscribe, rate, review, pre-order Nick's book, and if you're shopping for books, use my bookshop link. Thank you so much for being the best audience, the best listeners, and keep coming back because there's always new exciting things coming.